Mixing stone and iron can be both artistic and functional. Hi, I'm Steve Miller with Arizona Artists Blacksmiths Association. This month's demo is titled Stones and Iron. 4 demonstrators, Kathy Borthwick, David Breidenbaugh, Liz Carlier, and myself, will show how we mix stone and iron in our work. Kathy and David make up part 1, with Liz and myself in part 2. Kathy is our lead demonstrator, and she shows her method of mounting stones in iron with a candle holder and lily flower. David shows a variety of methods to drill stone and what works well from his experimentation. He also shows what finishes he uses for the type of stone and the look it produces. Check out part 2 for what Liz and I make.
Hello, I'm Kathy Borthwick. Welcome to our demo, Steel and Stones. It's actually going to be a 4-part demo. I've asked David Breidenbaugh, Liz Collier, and Steve Miller to also do little segments about how we use stone in our ironwork. The reason I've sort of discovered is that we all love stone, and so it was kind of nice to be able to mix 2 things you love together. But for anybody, adding stone to your work provides all kinds of good things. For one, you can use nice big stones as bases for sculpture pieces, and so it actually adds beauty with function. You can use the stone. By using stone, it just, as I say in academia, adds a bigger vocabulary to your work. It adds color, it adds texture. So today what I'm going to do is a little show and tell and a little bit of forging. And the show and tell part, it starts with the wonders that I have discovered at the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show. And for those of you maybe who know or don't know, in normal times, at the end of January and through for 2 weeks, end of January, beginning of February, Tucson turns into a giant gem and mineral show. Vendors come from all over the world and take over the motels, the parking lots, and there's just everything from drums of raw ore to the most expensive gems in the world shown at this show. And I used to go down there just because I loved rocks and just to see what people discover in the world, and just to meet people from all over the world. It was just really fun. And then I finally started saying, gosh, it would be nice if I could actually do something with these rocks. And so I started buying up and doing things. And the first thing I went for is the little geode slices. And they come in all kinds of sizes and all kinds of colors and shapes. Personally, I don't like the ones that get dyed. You can get ones that are just fuchsia and bright pink and green and all kinds of weird colors, but I kind of like the natural stones. And so I used to just buy individual ones, and then I started finding that you could find ones that had been cut from the same geode, and so you could get pairs and triplets and stuff. And so I would get smaller pieces like this, and then you can get up to really big pieces and even bigger pieces than this. So what I decided I would try doing is making candle holders with these pieces to begin. This is the end piece that I would end up with. I've made ones where you can have a taper. I've also just had a drip plate and then put little teacup candle holders on top of that. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the process of doing it. The first thing when you're looking for one of these can come in all kinds of weirdo shapes, and the less weird shape you get, the better, because you're trying to match the metal to the stone. So what I'll do is I just start out actually with a little piece of 5/16 rod and lay out the stone, and then I'll end up forging 2 pieces. One that goes around the stone halfway and then bend it for stuff. I do make a little tenon on the top, which is what the drip plate will go over at the end. And then you make a second piece that has to fit around the other side. And this is fussy. What you're trying to do is get as much metal to touch the geode as possible. When it gets all through, then I end up welding the pieces together, and then the geode will fit inside, and then we're going to lay that out and start gluing it in place. And what I use to begin with to glue is another great find from the Gem and Mineral Show. That's called this, it's Star Bond, and it's a real, well, it's a super glue, but it's really fast, and really you can get different viscosities of it, and it holds really fast. So this guy, you can kind of see, I've done the first step. Where it touches is where I've put the glue, and now you can feel it's pretty solid. I don't entirely trust it, because sometimes there's only certain places where it's touched. So what I'll go back next is then I'll mix up some epoxy, and the places where it's just kind of thin, I'll actually fill with epoxy, so there's just more places that it'll be glued together. And then once that dries, I'll take some steel wool, clean it all up, I'll clean off these little drips, and then repaint it, and then that will be the final result. And this guy is like the little piece before I have painted. I paint first, then put that guy on. So that was the candle holders, and I kind of like got excited about, I'm overly excited sometimes when I find cool things. So I started buying bigger pieces and thought these would be cool to do, make a lamp out of them. And so the idea of the lamps that I was doing is sort of similar to this, in that I would shape a piece around, so if you can just imagine a bigger one of those. However, you have to run wire and stuff through it, and so rather than using the solid wire, what I would do is get a piece of pipe that's like this, and with the opening that's just enough to fit a nipple into, and then I would do the same process of fitting the metal around, welding them together, but I have one piece that will go all the way through. And then, I don't want to do this right now, but what I'd end up doing to make the lamp actually work is they sell these little things called nipples, which they come in different lengths, and this is what the socket will screw onto. So what I'd end up doing is just putting that on here, and then taking like a little, because you don't want to mess this up because you want the threads to be okay, take a little leather mallet and hammer that down into it, and it'll hammer down, so you still want, enough sticking up that you can screw onto. And then to make sure this stays in place after you hammer it in, you can just take a center punch and just punch like 4 places around the edge, and that kind of dimples the metal in and holds this piece in place. I'll just show you one other thing, because sometimes when I get to the Gem and Mineral Show, you get a little crazy because things are so cool and you want to buy. And after I said I don't like stained pieces of geode, I do not know why, but I ended up buying this piece, which is a stained piece. The thing that's kind of interesting about this is you can buy ones that they've drilled a hole into, and I think they end up using these sometimes for clock faces and things. As I said, I bought this, I don't know, probably because I thought this was really cool or something, and it sat here forever because I had no idea what to do with it. Just recently I thought, what I'm going to do is turn this into a lamp base, and this is going to be part of the thing that I'm going to end up having this, and I thought it looked kind of like this could be a little pool of water. So what I'm doing is making some little lily pads that are going to go onto the bottom, and that's then going to be the base for this. So, at any rate, you can That's geodes, I guess. And then, as I said, as you go along, you still keep seeing new things and then wanting to expand what you can do. So the next thing, or one of the next things that I found were stones that I could use to be tabletops. And so these are a few things that I found, and they each kind of require their own solution for tabletops. So this piece is actually a piece of countertop that, that when the stone companies sell for countertops, this is kind of labradorite, which you can see all the little cool shimmering parts in it, which is just beautiful. For a while, actually for just a year down the Gem and Mineral Show, this company that was doing countertops down in Tucson, they had a booth, and I just happened upon them, and what they had decided to do is use their cutoffs and leftovers and turn them into tabletops. So you can see that they have polished this, they nicely finished the edges, they've rounded and polished it, because this is what it looks like if it's not polished. Not the most beautiful thing in the world, but they had this, and they only had a booth there for 1 year, but then I could go to their yard afterwards and just pick things up. A piece like this, it's got all these nice finished edges, you don't have to worry about making a frame for it, so you can just make a base and have this sit on top of it, and it's heavy enough that it's not going to slide. What I'll end up doing is gluing a couple pieces of little rubber around it, so where the table legs come, they kind of will go onto that and settle in. But that's tabletop. Then I started finding these, which I just fell in love with. This is actually a limestone that comes from Morocco, and these are all these cool sea fossils that are called orthoceras, and eventually these guys became squid, but they were not squid ages ago. These, I don't know, I've seen them show these laying on the floor, so I don't know if it was supposed to be some floor tile, but I thought it would make a pretty good tabletop. As you can see, they've polished the top of it, they have not polished the sides or the back. So what I end up doing for this is I'm making a frame out of angle iron, and then this can sit in the angle iron, and then I attach the legs to the angle iron frame. And then what I thought was my kind of coolest find was these pieces of petrified wood, and we're all used to the petrified wood in Arizona, which is basically wood got buried, it gets covered kind of by ash, and then the wood gets replaced by minerals. Here it got replaced by a lot of quartz, and we have those big, beautiful, colorful pieces of wood. These pieces, and they also, I guess I should say, cost a lot of money. These pieces come from Indonesia, and I'm not really sure what mineral has replaced the wood in here, but they end up being way more affordable, and so I've ended up getting these and making these in tabletops. And I don't know, what I kind of like about this, besides the affordability, is the fact you can still see a lot of the wood grain structure in them, and then you also get this nice, looks like the bark on the edges, which is kind of cool. And then oftentimes they do have little veins, replacement of some other kind of mineral, so you just get a really nice surface area. They do a nice job of polishing the tops of these, and what I kind of wanted these to be was just a top, and not to have the thing that held it take away from it. So I started making these little frames for it, which is just pieces. These are just 3/4 inch that I kind of turned the edges up, and then build this by turning this upside down, and then just trying to fit the piece in, catching where I can, where there's little angles in the, or dips in the piece so that this will sort of hold without moving, and then the piece can finally just fit in, and then I attach the base to this. Originally what I did is I thought it'd be kind of cool just to have this and have the top, so I would just make it so this piece could just fit in. But what I started finding is that once I would go to try to put the top on, I couldn't always remember which side was actually the top, and it kind of, sometimes I said, well, geez, does this thing actually even fit? Because I couldn't find exactly what angle I had used originally to fit the piece. And so I ended up deciding it's just as easy to glue it down than to worry about trying to match it, particularly when somebody took it home and then if they had the same anxiety trying to figure it out. So what I end up actually using, there's this stuff called E6000, and it's just it's kind of like a liquid nail or something, and I just will end up figuring out how this actually fits on. Then I'll just take this, run it all down, the edges that fit, and then set this back down and see, I'm going to figure out that I do this right. So anyway, and then put it back in place, and then we will go. See, already this is why you want to glue it down rather than choosing. The end result is this, and what I decided I wanted to do is make it kind of tree-like, and so the base is just kind of like a tree trunk with the roots, and I start making the basic piece. Then I do a rust finish on that, coat it with polyurethane afterwards, and then. But in the process, I make the legs, try to fit it to the top, put this on, and then sometimes, this one had to have extra little roots because I'm just always trying to make it as stable as possible. So I'll put that on, and I lean on it. If it starts to rock, I add a couple more little roots until I can find it to be real stable. And you can kind of see, there's a little messiness there. This is just, you can't really see where that E6000 is, that it's just glued to it, and that is that for them. Sorry that's a mess. Then, because as I said, you can always get giddy when you're at the Gem and Mineral Show. One year I decided that it would be sort of fun thinking about, particularly our exhibit that we do out at the Arboretum here, and have the Botanical Blacksmith, and have different outdoor pieces. And I thought, this would be fun to kind of make some flowers and use some of the little geodes in that. And so what I ended up doing is buying a box of geodes, little teeny geodes. This thing was just filled, crowded in with all these little pieces of little cut geodes, and they were all just lined up like this, and I thought, wow, this is going to be just great. And then it has sat here for a couple years, and when I thought about doing this demo, I said it's time to actually make some flowers. And in the process of pulling this out, I discovered, I don't know, I guess I thought geodes were round, and so I was expecting them all to be kind of like this, nice little rounded pieces. And what I discovered is they, of course, are not. There's ones like this, and so this is going to require a variety of solutions to make the flower. So the first flower I kind of came up with ended up being this, and so this can kind of use that rounded edge, and basically what this is, I'll just show you little parts. The flower is just cut out from some sheet steel. This one is kind of in the midst of being worked. It would just be the flat piece, and what I start doing, it's a 8-petaled flower. So what I can do is fold it over, so I can fold it across there, hammer that to make the little ridge, open it back up, and that starts giving me the veins. Then after that's done, you want to kind of make your flower as interesting as possible. And so then I'll just take the little peen of the hammer and then go around on all the edges of the leaves, give it a little bit of texture. Again, this is going to be pretty, just this nice flat thing. And then what I need to do is sink a hole that's going to fit, one of these pieces. And so I sink it until I get, and then I'll let it cool, try it out to make sure it fits the stone that I want. And then when it's done, with that, then you can go back over the horn or your anvil and just kind of bend the edges of the leaves to, again, make it look a little bit more lively. And for the stem, again, it's just making a little tenon in the end of happens to be 3/8, and then this is going to end up just going through that hole, and I'll weld that in place. And then, before I put the stone in place, then I'm going to paint it a little bit. This guy is in the process. You can sort of see where it's been welded, and then I ground on it just to make it smooth so the stone will fit back in. For the paint, again, because I'm in experimentation stage, so there's a couple, you can see a couple different finishes on there. For this first one, what I used is this is all just stuff that came from Michael's, and this is just a metallic paint, and I just rubbed that on with my fingers, and then sealed it up with this clear coat seal afterwards. And with this one, I tried using some of this alcohol ink, which I'm kind of interested to see what it might look like on its own. After I put that on, it would look fairly dull, which I was kind of surprised. But then putting the clear coat over it brought out a lot of color. But I had this, and then I rubbed some of this. I guess you can't really see it. It's like a powder, actually, kind of a little metallic powder over that, because I was sort of frightened because this thing looks so darn dull. But I think, I don't know, I'll try it 2 different ways to see. To get the stone to fit in, right now this morning it's kind of cold in my shop, so we'll see how it goes. There's just these little, J.B. Weld sells this. This is actually the stuff from Harbor Freight. It's just called epoxy putty stick, and it's just a malleable, thick, putty, I guess, that you can use to hold the stone in place. So you just take a little piece. Depends on how you need it. Get off of here. I'm just gonna knead it up a little bit. And then before we get too far along, we want to sort of figure out how we want that placed on the flower. And then maybe I'll get a little bit more of this. Place it kind of around where this is going to fit into the flower, so it's just making a big gob around the back of it, and get that to sit in place. Try to make it as invisible as possible, and that's it. So that kind of was my solution or an idea for the rounded ones, but I still had those weirdo pieces. And I'm like, well, how can I use pieces that are, have this bigger end to it? And so I started playing around, which is still in the process, and came up with this little flower. And then this piece can just be placed in there. So then we'll end up with a nice way to kind of adapt to that uneven background there. I've been playing around with what size pipe to use and how to do this, and this is what will kind of show a little bit of the forging to put this together. In the end, what I'll do with this again is put some kind of paint finish on it to have the whole thing go. This stone will be held in place with that same putty. So I tried this, and then I tried a larger version of it, and this I think is going to be a little bit more effective. This is just the black pipe. I think it's like, I don't know, I'll have to go measure. And then you make this extra little leaves, and we'll just weld them on. So what we're going to show right now, just so we do show a little forging in this, is how to make this part of the flower top. So we'll head over to the forge. To what?
Go.
So what we're ending up is actually, I guess, trying to get to that end piece. We're trying to get here, and we're starting here. So what we're doing is, you can just see that this is the black pipe, and what I've done is cut it off at an angle. I'm going to heat it up, then use a guillotine fuller to neck it down and spread it out, and then we'll end up forge welding it onto this stem. So I'm going to stick this in the forge right now to start getting it going. And basically what we're going to do is show the process of making this little part. When it's done, I'll end up cutting it off of the rest of the pipe, so we'll end up with a little piece like this. And then in the meantime, we've taken a piece of 3/8 rod, upset the end a little bit, so it's going to slide down through the flower, get attached in there. We'll neck it down a little bit more, and then you can either forge weld this or MIG weld it or whatever to the stem, and then go from there. And then the other part is making the little leaves. I'm going to step over here for a minute. What we're ending up with is these, two little leaves that we can slide over the stem to give a little bit of leaf. And what we're starting with is just a couple pieces, again, cut out. Sorry about that. Cut out from sheet steel. Maybe we'll show doing this. Basically what we're going to do is just, again, put a little texture into the leaf so it just looks a little nicer, and then give a little shape to it. So we'll do a couple things at one time. Screaming, so I don't know. But basically what we're going to do is bring this out. We want to make use a guillotine fuller, and we're going to leave like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch below where the cut is to make that little bulb at the bottom of the flower. Take this off. Line that up, and then we're going to slowly start making it around. So we are where we thought we left a little bit there. I could have probably left a little bit more. We're going to heat it up, keep doing this. The big thing you need to keep looking at is obviously you're making that hole smaller, and you want to make sure you don't neck it down so much that you can't fit your rod into there. And then while we're waiting for that to reheat, we'll do the leaves. So to do the texture on the leaf, I just use like a little hammer that's got kind of a real thin peen on it. And we'll just use that too. A fuller too, but it's easy to do it this way. Just so you end up with something that looks nice.
Like this. This stuff is so thin, it still has enough. I mean, normally you wouldn't be wanting to work your steel when it's lost its color, but this, just because we're just putting some lines in it, it still has movement and works for that. Sort of see, there's my hole. It's still got a lot of room in there, so I can do this heat one more time to get that down to the diameter that I want it to be. So that is now to curl that leaf around to get it to be for the stem. What I'm going to use is the cross peen of my hammer, and then this nice little swage block where I can use this to roll the leaf around. And remember, when you're doing this, the pattern you just put on it, that's the outside of the leaf, so make sure you line it up right. Sorry. Now we just want to put this here, and we're just going to start So you want to get it kind of rounded enough so you can still slide your stem into it, and but not so sloppy that it's really hard to work. This obviously doesn't look all that pretty as a leaf, so we're going to heat it up again and then get that to curve over a little bit. Just get that back in here. Do the same thing with the other one, and this leaf I had made this curve into, and so I made them opposing. So okay, so it should be the last heat for this height. Okay, so that feels pretty tight in there. I can still slide it in, but I don't really have much in the way of wiggle room, so I'm going to call that good. So now we're going to heat it up, use the horn and the anvil to spread this out and make it look more like that. These little leaves. You're kind of fighting that little curve you just put in a little bit ago, so just do something till it kind of looks pretty to you. And when this goes on the stem, it'll actually kind of get angled a little bit, so it has a nice curve. So we'll just put that aside. Do the other one.
Which other one?
Another leaf. Just trying to look to, again, make sure it looks kind of nice too, and that it doesn't have any like real obvious flat spots on it. And I'll put that aside. Now we're going to take our pipe out and use the peen of the hammer and the horn to kind of spread that opening out and shape the claw a little bit. So take it out. We're going to just use this. We now want to start spreading that out. As we get to this part, we want to both free it out and get it flattened a little bit. So we're going to use Okay, so we're starting to get that. Now we've widen that a little bit, and then we'll work on this part. The pipe is getting a little hot, so I'm going to stick it in the water to cool it off a little bit. As you remember, I showed we cut this off, we put this stem in. I'm going to start heating that up so we can weld this together. So the first step will be to reheat it and then neck it down a little bit more so it tightens that up there. Heating that while we wait for that. Okay, so what all that was, again, was just to pull the bottom part out a little bit, and then you just kind of work it around until it just has a pleasing shape and is more or less symmetrical. Mostly nature isn't symmetrical, but we forgive nature and we don't forgive blacksmiths, so we try to make it as symmetrical as we can. So now I'm going to just heat it up again and just kind of try to taper the underneath part just a little bit, and then we'll put it aside. So. Okay, now this part we're going to go back to the guillotine fuller and see about getting this neck down. That in, and then this guy was a little sloppier than the other one, so and I just did, I made this much better. Do it again. It's better, but it's still loose. So for this, we're just trying to make this not be quite such a dramatic change. Okay, so I'm gonna call that good. I'm gonna set it aside. When it gets cold, then I can go and cut it off, and I'll cut it off at the bottom of the neck, and then we'll be moving on to the step we're doing now of getting that attached to the stem. Well, it still feels a little loose. Maybe we'll go back one more time just to get it tight. And now we wait. Oh, it's nice to have several things in the fire, so you don't have to stand around waiting. But that's what we're doing this time. So. Okay, and so what I did before and I'm doing again is, that guillotine folder's only so wide, so it kind of necks it down above, and so I'm trying to get the rest of it to kind of get as close to the, so that there's not a gap between it and the stem. And then we're going to just 412 this together. Presumably, that necking, when things cool, it should contract, and that should be good to go on its own. I personally wouldn't trust it, and then that also looks kind of gunky to have that kind of a step, so if you weld it together, you can smooth the whole thing out. And we'll try the forge weld. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the on the forge, and then now because that's getting hotter, it has even better chance of scaling up, which we don't want it to be really horribly scaled. So I'm going to just keep trying to kind of keep the upper part of the flour cool and just have the part that's going to get welded get really hot. So we're just pulling that off. I'm going to stick it in there, get it kind of hot, and then apply the the flux to it. And this is the kind that I use. there's, I guess, a few kinds that they make that are supposed to be good for gas forges. This one I don't know, have had good success with, so I like it. I've tried a couple others and didn't like it as well. And what I recently learned is, I guess, in this there are some little metal bits, which I think kind of help with the flux, helping with the 412. And so it's kind of good to shake it up a little bit, so that stuff's all mixed. But what I'll do is bring the piece out when it gets kind of hot, brush it off a little bit, and then apply this around that base where the weld's going to occur. Let it get a little hotter. Okay, so once it's just out, it's not obviously a forge weld heat, but just hot. We're going to clean it up just a little bit. What we're trying to do is get the welding flux right around where the weld's going to occur. So that's all ready. We're going to cool off that upper part of the flower again. Back in to get hot. Try to kind of get it under where the flame is. Now, when I started forging, I used coal forge, and so doing a forge weld in a coal fire is pretty cool because you have it in there, and when you watch, you can actually see the surface of the metal melt, and it kind of ends up looking like butter, and you can just see this like little liquid steel, and you know that it's time to come out and weld. And that never happens in a gas fire, so you never see that. And for a long time, when I first started trying to do forge welds, I could do it on smaller pieces of metal, but when it started getting thicker, I just had no success at all, and so I just figured you just couldn't do it. And then I went to visit Peter Seven one day, who does really well at forge welding in a gas forge, and asked him, can you show me how you do it? He said, sure. So he stuck his piece in the fire, and then he said, well, let me show you what I'm working on, and he walked away from the forge, and I thought, well, we should be there watching it, because you would never leave a piece of metal in a forge with a coal fire. But he said, no, it's no problem at all. Walked around, did a few things. We came back. He hammered the thing, and it welded perfectly. And what I discovered is basically gas fire works a little differently, and this heat just has to soak. And you basically have to wait till the metal kind of looks the color of the fire inside the forge, and then that tells you it's ready to go. And so oftentimes that's it. You just have to be patient and leave it go. So when you think it's ready, then out it comes. Same thing, over to your forge, and you just, you're not trying to hammer really hard, because you're not trying to displace stuff. You're just trying to get it to adhere. Basically see we've eliminated that little ridge that we had. Mostly. It looks like here, I don't know, I always kind of do the belt and suspenders approach, and I'll weld it again just to feel confident that it actually, I didn't miss on anything. So we will in a little bit, reflux it, and one more little flux around. Okay. Back up to that little bit of character. Okay, so we've got that more or less done now. We'll just wire wheel it, and then, well, actually I'll wire brush it now, and then after it's cool, I will actually take it over to the wire wheel to get some more of that scale off of it. So a little bit of scale is kind of cool because it gives you some texture, but a lot of it looks like you burnt your metals. Knock a little bit of it out. Okay, so that's that. So the next step for me, cool it off, stick it in the tumbler to get it all nice and clean, and then we'll come back and add those leaves, add color, add our geode, be ready to go. Thank you so much for showing up. Are on.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Breidenbach, Arizona Artists Blacksmith Association, and this is.
Kathy Borthwick.
So today we're going to talk about some of the rocks that I use for my artwork and how to drill them and cut them and things I do with it. I really like working with rocks with some of the organic type of stuff I use. It just seems so natural to put them into a rock than any other base. And also I do a lot of hiking and camping around Arizona. And it's almost every time I go out I'm going to see a cactus, a plant, a grass, a bush, something growing out of a crack in the rock. And you wonder how it manages to do that, but somehow nature survives. So that's where my inspiration comes from. So I do things like this, small rock, small plant. These are fun to make, doesn't take very long, fit it in between the big projects. Now for this one, first step is to flatten the rock. And then you drill it part way through, glue it in with epoxy. And to flatten the rock, I use these things, diamond wheel. The brand name of this is Norton. You can get them from the home improvement centers. This one has 2 rows of it, ran about $70. There's cheaper ones. Buy whatever you think you're going to make the best use out of. It throws off a lot of dust when you're grinding away at it. So definitely want to wear your mask. Stone dust can be quite hard on the lungs. There's a lung disease called silicosis. It can be quite deadly. More of a long-term issue, but don't take any chances. Wear your dust mask. Wear your safety glasses, with side shields. Always wear earmuffs no matter what you're doing. So, what do you want to see next, Karen?
Okay, so first, and so this is just this is going on to just regular grinder?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of heavy, so you don't want to use a lightweight angle grinder. More of a medium duty one, but of course you don't have to go up to the 7 and 9 inch angle grinders either.
Cool. Okay, and is this mostly what you've used to flatten them? You haven't tried other things, or
That works so well.
thing? Okay.
Really works well.
And again, it was a
Norton Diamond Wheel.
Okay.
And there's other brands. I think DeWalt makes them also. Home Depot, Lowe's, maybe some hardware stores, mail order, of course.
Okay.
Lasts a long time. So. These rocks are kind of neat. I like to pick up a variety of rocks whenever I'm out camping and hiking. I want to have a big supply to go to pick from. That hole is drilled partway through also, and it's also glued in with epoxy. Some of the bigger stuff, I'll drill it all the way through, and that makes it a lot easier to move if it's something really heavy. You have one problem with drilling all the way through, though. This happened to me just about a week ago, and I decided to save this for the video. Sometimes the rock wins, and the blacksmith loses. You drill all the way through, and it often breaks apart.
That alone could be an interesting sculptural piece.
I could say that I did this on purpose,
Yeah.
give it an interesting name and say it's a sculpture. But the drill bit is stuck in there now, so I'm going to have to break the rock to get it out.
So are you just finding that that's just the luck of the draw, or is there anything you've kind of figured out to improve your chances? Or
A geologist could probably look at a rock and say, yeah, that's going to break apart on you. As a blacksmith, that's just kind of the luck of the draw.
okay.
Drilling all the way through is more risky than partway through. When you need a hammer drill for this, but you don't necessarily have to lean on it really hard. The harder you lean on it, the more likely it's going to break. So do it just enough to drill a hole.
And you're using that same kind of drill whether you're drilling all the way through or not? Or okay.
I've experimented with other bits, abrasive bits. These are from Milwaukee. Similar stuff that you'd use for drilling in glass. This is Tile and Natural Stone. I haven't tried this Milwaukee brand, Tile and Natural Stone. It might work okay on some of this stuff without, this is not a hammer drill,
Okay.
not a hammer bit. So it's a little safer. I'll try that out sometime. These bits have a diamond coating, so they're strictly abrasive. Marginal success with it. This is Milwaukee also. I like using those on granite. Granite is almost guaranteed it's going to break if you use a hammer drill on it. Some type of abrasive bit is best for that.
And are you picking stones mostly for when you're out walking and you just find the things you think are looking cool, or do you like conceive of your project and then look for the stone that will match?
No, I pick the stones anytime I see a good one. The brown stones goes good with the rusty sculpture. I've got a collection of stones out in the backyard. Whenever I see something interesting, I grab them. This is a nice color pattern to it. Kind of the orange and tan color, and I like that. So I grab this, I'll use it for something. Kind of shiny on the side too. And it's also almost flat on the bottom already. If I use this for an outdoor sculpture, I probably wouldn't bother to grind it at all. If I wanted to make a lamp or something indoor out of it, it does rock a little bit, so I'd have to grind the corners down. Probably knock this corner down right here. If it's a lamp like this, you want to loosen leather on the bottom because you're going to be sitting on the table. Now this is a sandstone. I get it from club member Jerry Horn. And I really like working with this. When you want to flatten the bottom, use the abrasive flat disc is all you need for that. It's fairly soft compared to these other stones. When you're drilling it, you still want to use a masonry bit. Quite often I'll do it on the drill press. Really easy to work with. Color comes out really nice. This is one that still has a natural color, and this one has a varnish on it. I really like how the varnish brings the color out. It just brightens it so much. And what I use for that, there's probably other things, but this is the automotive clear coat. It's 2 parts. I got it to Mesa at Space Age Paints. Probably available other places, mail orders, of course. Really looks nice. First coat soaks in a lot. 2, 3 coats is what you need to build up some color to it. And for the lamps, this is I think it's called 1/8" nipple. It's a lamp part. threaded rod, it's hollow on the inside, so your lamp cord will go through it, threads right into the socket. Outside diameter is 3/8 inch, so you drill a 3/8 inch hole, glue this in with epoxy, and then continue on with whatever decoration you want to do.
And then let's see, for your, so that's your lamp. So how did you deal with the, or will you deal with the cord? Well, you obviously did. So how's the cord?
Well, the hole goes all the way through,
Mhm.
and then there's a groove, cut a groove in the bottom of the
Okay,
base for the
okay.
cord to come out. Now, I slid this pipe over I slid the pipe down,
Mhm.
and then I put some hot glue around the base to seal it,
Oh, okay.
and then I filled it with epoxy. And then when the epoxy dried, I peeled off the hot glue since you don't really want to
okay.
see that. So it's in there pretty solid. Lamp cord goes all the way through. It's turned out really nice. Let's see, what else do you know about? When you're working with the sandstone, if you get it dirty, the easiest way to clean the dirt off is with a stiff brush. Get off all the dirty fingerprints and stuff like that before you varnish it. There's a variety of drill bits available at Home Depot. Kind of experiment with all of them when you're drilling these other kind of rocks. I wish I could recommend something, but I'm still new at this. Hammer drill often breaks it. Some of these other things are a little safer, but they're also slower. Just have to try different things. That's why I have a big collection of rocks. As far as the drill goes, this is a Milwaukee hammer drill, and it's quite powerful. It really will drill anything, but you want to ease off on it so you don't risk the chances of breaking the rock. And it uses a certain type of bit. You can't just use any masonry bit in there. But this is handy to have. Really good. They're expensive. You can probably rent them at tool stores if you don't want to buy one. If you don't do enough of this to buy one, you can rent one. But they're really good to have for this. Rocks like this. I like the rocks that are, sorry.
No, go right ahead. We can always cut. No, you actually were good back there, so yeah. Go ahead.
I like these kind of rocks because they're mostly flat. You got a lot of surface area to put flowers, decoration. I could use this for a lamp. I could use this for anything, just any kind of sculpture with organic forms on it. Mostly flat on the bottom already. Some of the ones like this, these are an interesting shape too. It just depends on what you want to use it for. It doesn't have as much surface area, depending on how many different plants you want to put on there.
Okay, and so like you talked about for the lamp, you did a little bit extra, and it looks like for these other projects, mostly it's just gone in, so you're not trying, like if you had multiple branches coming over your rocks, would you try to adhere them to the rock with epoxy also, or are you counting on the shaft to be the main thing to?
Everything's welded to the main shaft.
Okay.
It holds it in there really tight. If I wanted to put smaller flowers coming out of here, I drill separate holes for them.
Okay.
The finish, I'm not going to put a finish on this one. If I was inclined to do that, it'd probably be linseed oil. Mask off the rock and then put a little coat of linseed oil on here. For this one I sprayed it. I like using this Golf Nouveau Clear Guard. Spray the plant and the rock at the same time. It looks really nice. A little bit of shine to it, not too much. Granite, this stuff looks really nice on its own. I'd almost be inclined not to put a finish on this one. One idea I had for this is a candle cup.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it looked pretty nice all by
That
itself,
does,
just like
yeah,
that.
oopsie.
So if I could get a couple of these, about the same size and shape, and then sell them as
And is that something you just found walking around, or?
Yeah. Yeah, grab rocks whenever you see them.
Spoken like a geologist, blacksmith geologist.
Okay, this is the sandstone I really like using. I get it from club member Terry Horn. It's really nice to work with. It's easy to work with. It's soft, so you don't need to use a hammer drill on it. You don't use an angle grinder to smooth it. The bottom I smooth off. I used woodworking tools for this. You can always use a flat disc and an angle grinder if you don't have the woodworking sanders for it. As far as drilling holes in it, you still want to use a masonry bit, but you don't want to use a hammer drill. Quite often I'll do it on the drill press. It drills really easy. Really great to work with. The finish I like to use on it is this automotive clear coat. 2 parts, get it from Space Age Paints in Mesa. First coat soaks in really fast. You need probably 3 coats to get a good coating on it, get a good finish on it. I brush it on, use a disposable brush, and this is what it ends up looking like. It really brings the color out well. I like how it shines. When you're brushing it, the only thing you need to be careful of is it's such a coarse surface. You'll get little air bubbles in some of the cracks. You need to brush out the air bubbles or they're going to dry like that. It dries so fast. So recoat probably an hour, maybe 2 hours. Get it done the same day rather quickly. As far as making a lamp out of it, you want to get this threaded rod at the home improvement stores or hardware stores. It's hollow on the inside. The threads are the right size to go into the lamp socket. The outside diameter is 3/8, so use a 3/8 masonry bit to drill all the way through it. And then when you glue it in, you want to put a little bit of epoxy around the outside and stick it in the hole. It's a tight enough fit, it's not going to fall out before the glue dries. So it works out really well. As far as where to run the lamp cord, you tip this over and you can get a good shot at it. Zoom in here. You cut this groove in there, whatever tool you have available. Some angle grinder is good. Cut that little groove in there. And then you can almost see the end of the nipple sticking through there. Lamp cord slides right through it. It's just an easy way to do it. Ideally, you want to glue a leather pad down here. It doesn't scratch the table since it is a table lamp. When you get that threaded rod glued into place, then I just slide this pipe down over it. I use some hot glue gun to seal it around the bottom. And then I fill this with epoxy. And this is the epoxy that I use. It's very liquidy once you mix it together. It's very liquidy. It fills up that space between the pipe and the threaded rod. It locks everything in really tight. You don't need to buy this much of it. I use it for other stuff, is why I buy so much of it at one time. Epoxy from the hardware store is a little bit thicker, but it'll probably still work. It'll run down there and seal everything out. When you want to clean the sandstone, if you get it dirty through handling around your blacksmith shop, a stiff wire brush is good to do that. You can scrape the dirt off of it real easily. You want to get the dirt off before you seal it in there with the varnish. Sandblasters work also, but if you're just going to touch everything up, then just use a stiff wire brush like this.
Okay.
Okay, let's recap the tools a little bit. Hammer drill's handy for the hard rocks, but sometimes it breaks them as you go through it, so try to use a gentle touch. Don't press any harder than you have to. More risky if you're drilling all the way through it than partway through it. So generally it works out okay, but don't be too disappointed if the rock breaks. I started experimenting with some of these other drill bits, abrasive drill bits. They don't need a hammer drill for them. Mixed success with them. Some rocks are different than others. You just have to experiment a little bit. Try one of the abrasive bits. If that doesn't work, flattening the bottom of it. Angle grinder with a diamond blade. That's good for doing it on the hard rocks. Flattening the bottom of it. For the sandstone, you just need sandpaper for that. Either sandpaper in a woodworking sander or a flat disc and an angle grinder. So that kind of summarizes everything. I really hope people try it. A lot of rocks in Arizona, all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Very decorative patterns to them. So next time you're out hiking, camping, just sightseeing, grab a few rocks, bring them home with you, try it out for some of your
Wait a minute,
organic
wait a minute.
cultures.
We always do that.
So thanks a lot for joining us, and
Yeah.
I hope you try some of this out.